Around 2004, in a quiet corner of the American Midwest, an unnamed scrap metal dealer made a purchase that should have been routine. He was a man who dealt in the discarded and the forgotten. At a local antique fair, he spotted a small golden egg sitting on a three-legged pedestal. The price was $13,300. His plan was calculated and entirely professional. He intended to dismantle the object, melt the gold, and sell it for a modest profit of $500. However, he encountered an unexpected problem. No one would buy the object. Prospective buyers told him that the gold was too impure and that he had overpaid for what they described as a common trinket. Frustrated and facing a financial loss, the man left the egg on his kitchen counter, next to a cupcake. It remained there for years, unrecognized and unloved, until the winter of 2012, when he performed a simple search for the name engraved on the watch found inside the egg: Vacheron Constantin. What he discovered did not just save his finances, it sent a shockwave through the world of art history. That common trinket was actually the Third Imperial Easter Egg. It was a lost masterpiece, an Imperial Easter gift from Tsar Alexander III to his Empress in 1887. Starting in 1885, the Tsar established a sacred tradition. Every Easter morning, he would present his Empress with a mechanical marvel that contained a hidden surprise. It was a gesture of absolute love and absolute power. Before this discovery, it had not been seen by the public for 112 years. Its actual value was not $13,000, but $33 million. This discovery proved a theory that many had dismissed as a fantasy. The lost treasures of the Romanovs are not all gone. They are still out there, hiding in plain sight, disguised by the passage of time and the ignorance of their owners. Today, there are 7 missing relics. These 7 objects are among the most expensive decorative objects on Earth, with a collective value estimated at over $250 million. Where did they go? Were they destroyed during the violence of the Revolution? Are they locked in the secret vaults of the modern elite? Or are they, like the scrap dealers find, sitting on a shelf, waiting for someone to recognize their true identity? Welcome to the Reserve. Today, we journey into the heart of the Russian Empire to uncover what really happened to the missing $250 million. To understand why these objects are so coveted, we must look at the man who became the preeminent jeweler of St. Petersburg, Peter Karl Fabergé. In the late 19th century, St. Petersburg was a city of rigid social hierarchies and overwhelming opulence. The Russian court was a world governed by strict etiquette, where every movement was scrutinized, and every gift was a political statement. Maria Feodorovna, a Danish princess who had married into the Romanov family, often felt overwhelmed by this demanding and formal environment. She was far from home, living in a palace of stone and ice. In 1885, the Tsar turned to Fabergé to create a gift that would offer his wife a moment of genuine joy. This was the first significant shift in the Romanov story. In a world where the Tsar controlled everything, he gave total autonomy to an artist. Fabergé's workshop became a laboratory of luxury. He developed a technique called guilloche, where intricate patterns were engraved into gold and then covered with layers of translucent, coloured enamel. The result was a surface that seemed to glow from within, a visual trick that no other jeweller in Europe could replicate. The 1885 egg was Fabergé's first masterpiece. On the outside, it was a modest shell of white enamel, but it contained a sequence of surprises. A golden yolk, which opened to reveal a golden hen, which originally contained a tiny diamond replica of the imperial crown, and a ruby pendant. The Empress was so enchanted that Fabergé was granted a standing commission for life. By the time Alexander's son, Nicholas II, took the throne in 1894, the commission had doubled. Nicholas continued the annual surprise for both his mother and his wife, Alexandra. But as the beauty of the eggs reached its peak, the foundation of the empire was beginning to fail. By the early 1900s, the Romanovs were living in a world of impossible luxury, a level of wealth so extreme that it felt disconnected from the reality of the Russian people. While the Tsars played with gold mechanical swans and miniature crystal palaces, the peasants were facing starvation and the looming shadow of the First World War. Nicholas II was now the leader of an empire in crisis. Yet, even as the country marched toward revolution, the eggs continued to be delivered. However, the eggs began to reflect the change in the world. In 1916, Fabergé delivered the steel military egg. It was devoid of diamonds and heavy ornamentation, made instead of industrial steel and set upon 4 miniature artillery shells. It was a signal that the age of opulence was ending. While the royal family remained in the capital, their treasures were already being prepared for the end. In 1914, as the German army advanced during the Great War, the Tsar ordered the evacuation of the imperial jewels to protect them from a foreign invader. The eggs were packed into heavy wooden transport crates and sent to the reinforced vaults of the Kremlin armory in Moscow. It was meant to be a temporary measure of safekeeping, a way to shield the crown's legacy from the fires of war. But in February 1917, the revolution finally arrived. Nicholas II was forced to abdicate his throne, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule. As the royal family was arrested and moved from palace to palace, the crated treasures in Moscow fell into the hands of the burgeoning Soviet state. That original act of caution had inadvertently gift-wrapped the Romanov legacy for the architects of the new Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin, and, eventually, Joseph Stalin. Following the execution of the Romanov family in 1918, the Bolsheviks faced a desperate situation. Under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, and later Joseph Stalin, the new nation was functionally bankrupt. They were a nation attempting to become an industrial superpower overnight. To achieve this, they needed hard foreign currency to buy tractors for farming, industrial machinery for factories, and modern weapons for the military. They viewed the treasures of the Tsars not as art, but as capital. Stalin created a department known as the Antiquariat. Their mission was to turn the Romanov legacy into hard currency. This was the treasures into tractors policy, a frantic liquidation of history. The Soviet government invited foreign businessmen into the secret vaults of the Kremlin. Among them was Armand Hammer, who bought 10 imperial eggs and sold them in American department stores like Lord & Taylor. In this chaotic environment, the official record-keeping was practically non-existent. This is the moment when our 7 lost relics began their long disappearance. They were often sold as generic precious metal scrap, their true identity as Imperial Fabergé eggs completely erased. If we're to find the missing treasures, worth over $250 million, we must look at the specific details of what remains lost. The first is the 1886 hen egg with sapphire pendant. We know it existed because it was listed in a 1922 Kremlin inventory, though curiously, it was misidentified by Soviet clerks as a silver hen. Fabergé's own records tell a different story. It was actually a masterpiece of a solid gold hen, pulling a sapphire egg out of a nest. Today, it is likely sitting on a mantelpiece, mistaken for a high-quality animal figurine, while its owner remains unaware that they are touching a $30 million fortune. Then, there is the 1888 cherub with chariot egg. known from only a single blurry photograph. It features an angel pulling a two-wheeled chariot containing the egg. Records suggest it may have arrived in America in the 1930s, potentially mislabeled in a New York catalogue as a silver wheelbarrow. We must also consider the 1889 Necessaire egg. This was a gold case encrusted with emeralds, rubies, and sapphires. In 1952, a London jeweller sold it to a buyer recorded only as a stranger for £1,200. That stranger walked into a luxury jeweller and bought an imperial treasure for cash. It is likely sitting in a British inheritance today, perhaps misidentified as a jewelled imperial vanity case. Then there is the 1896 Alexander III portrait's egg, long thought to be lost. Many scholars now believe it is hiding in plain sight in a Washington, D.C. museum, misidentified for decades as the 12 monograms egg. While the beautiful shell is secure, its heart, a surprise of 6 royal portraits, remains a ghost, missing from the collection to this day. In 1897, Fabergé created the mauve egg. While the heart-shaped surprise containing miniatures of the royal family was found years ago, the mauve enamel shell remains missing. It is possible it was damaged and sold as simple scrap. The gold melted down, and the history lost with it. We must also consider the 1903 Royal Danish egg. It stood over 9 inches tall, one of the largest missing eggs in existence. Its significant size makes it difficult to lose, yet it has vanished completely. Finally, there is the 1909 Alexander III commemorative egg. Made of platinum and white enamel, it contained a gold bust of the Tsar. To the Soviets, the platinum was worth more as a spark plug or a military component than as a memory of the Tsar. This egg faces the highest statistical probability of having been melted down for bullion. The 2012 discovery in the Midwest proved that the lost can be found. When the scrap dealer met with Fabergé expert and Wartsky director Kieran McCarthy, the authenticity of a long-lost treasure was finally confirmed. Upon learning that the object he had kept on his kitchen counter was worth $33 million, the dealer reportedly collapsed to the floor in shock. When McCarthy first saw the photographs, he knew instantly that history had been rewritten. It wasn't just a financial find, it was the reclamation of a vanished masterpiece. This single identification shifted the entire landscape of Fabergé research, proving that even after over a century of silence, the impossible was still possible. The official rediscovery was announced to the world in 2014, when the egg was exhibited in London for the first time in 10 decades. It was a moment of validation that transformed a myth back into reality. The egg had survived simply because it did not look like a traditional enamelled Fabergé egg, allowing it to hide in plain sight for generations. The Fabergé eggs are the physical remains of a family that lived in a world of absolute luxury, a world that eventually vanished. These objects are the last witnesses to a fallen empire. 7 missing relics remain. 7 treasures worth over $250 million are still waiting to be recognized. Have you ever seen an object at an estate sale or an antique shop that made you wonder about its true origin? The story of the Fabergé eggs reminds us that history is a collection of fragments waiting to be put back together. Thank you for joining us at the Reserve. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the vault of history, subscribe and turn on notifications. Our next mystery is already unfolding. Until next time.